Hey there, good afternoon to you. 406 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up this very hour, our friend Julio Rosas will be here at 4:30, the man who goes to riots and then reports back. He was keeping track of these anti-Israel leftist protests and riots taking place this weekend. He's got updates for us ahead. And then David Strom is here from Hot Air at 5:30. We'll mark Joe Biden's 81st birthday today. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Hope you do. We've got a lot to discuss. There's a story in The Telegraph this weekend. The Telegraph, another British publication, that had me laughing out loud as I was reading it. And it's because it's full of a bunch of stuff that you and I knew, but the Telegraph is acting like it's a big surprise. Did you know that plants like carbon dioxide? You familiar with this phenomenon? I think you might know where I'm going with this, but for years we've been told by, Greta Thunberg, Tiny Toon Adventures over there, that that the whole planet's going to just be destroyed. AOC told us we had 12 years. Remember? Al Gore actually put us on a timer, and it came and went while Rush Limbaugh was still alive. Rush kept the timer up on his website, the Al Gore Doomsday Clock. And I remember when it lapsed, like that, we're talking like a decade ago now. It was a while ago. It lapsed, and they had a big celebration that the world was still here, and Al Gore's prediction was obviously wrong. Obviously wrong. Well, the Telegraph adds now to the evidence that this is all just complete insanity, an international psychosis that's overtaken so many of our institutions. Headline, global warming might not happen quite as fast as we thought. Here's why. You ready for this? There's the lead sentence. Plants will absorb 20% more carbon dioxide than predicted by the end of the century, a new study has found, suggesting climate models are overestimating how fast the planet will warm. Trinity College Dublin said its research painted a, quote, uncharacteristically upbeat picture for the planet, end quote, after finding models had failed to take into account all the elements of photosynthesis. In case you're wondering, you may want to ask your fifth grader, what is photosynthesis? During photosynthesis, green plants use light energy from the sun to convert carbon dioxide, water, and minerals into the sugars that they need for growth. What? Wait a second. So you're saying the thing that I breathe out on a routine basis, and perhaps at an even greater pace from 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern every single day, is actually benefiting plants, and plants are consuming this? Yes, they are, apparently, according to the Telegraph. Scientists thought that climate change could weaken the process. Why would climate change weaken the process? If there's more carbon dioxide, plants are going to be overwhelmed by all of the available resources? Is that what we're told? But the new research suggests plants can adjust to the temperatures, efficiently absorbing carbon dioxide, producing extra nutrients, and continuing to thrive. They found that on a global scale, the amount of carbon converted during photosynthesis could be up to 68% greater by the end of the century compared to the start of the century, and 20% more than some current models suggest. They move on here, and of course, as you might expect, this is the Telegraph, so they're still clinging desperately to the religion here, and they say this: there is still a need to cut emissions. There's still a need. Silvia Calderaro, assistant professor at Trinity School of Natural Sciences, said this, quote, what our study shows is that ecosystems could take up more CO2 out of the atmosphere than previously thought, which would mean lower CO2 concentrations, so a less steep rise in temperature. So yes, that would give us a bit more time to reach net zero, she says. But it is important to note that we predict a lot of this drawdown will happen towards the end of the century, while we need to cut emissions now, or possibly yesterday, she says. So that's kind of funny. So in the face of all of this obvious science, the kind of stuff that you do learn in grade school, they're still insisting, but, just to be safe, we better, hurt humanity. We better cut down on your ability to travel great distances with ease. We better cut off your ability to have heat at, peak times during the winter. Better cut off the natural gas and the coal and instead move you to inefficient solar panels and windmills, the kind of stuff that breaks down or doesn't actually produce energy. But it is made in China, so there is that. That's what they want to push you towards. They go on to say plants take up a huge amount of carbon dioxide every year, slowing down the effects of climate change. Yeah, because this is what we call an ecosystem. It's another concept you may have learned in grade school. Obviously, when you've got all the mammals consuming the oxygen and then breathing it out, and then you've got all the trees consuming the carbon dioxide and then producing oxygen, we kind of work together, don't we? Isn't that kind of the thing? And so, are you telling me that the planet will respond when there's more carbon dioxide out there? Plants will flourish to a greater extent? We'll see more growth in order to meet the needs of the planet? Shock upon shocks. The only shocking thing about all of this, to be candid with you, is that the Telegraph published it. That's the shocking thing. That they said out loud that it turns out trees consume carbon dioxide. In recent years, observations have shown that the carbon dioxide uptake by plants is increasing, which is likely driven in part by increased vegetation growth caused by carbon rises. An increase in the ability of plants to absorb carbon dioxide not only removes it from the atmosphere, but more growth brings down land temperature and mitigating effects on climate change globally indirectly. Well, sure. Anyone who's ever stood under a tree knows that it's 10 degrees cooler than it is outside in the sun, right? That's usually, is that what you've heard before? 10 degrees is usually what I go with. 10 degrees cooler under the shade than it is out in the sun. And so as you get a greater tree canopy, you get more coolness on the earth. This is also the effect that clouds have, by the way. The more clouds that are produced, we did a story recently on this, remember? That clouds were actually holding back the damaging effects of global warming. Like, oh, really? Oh, the clouds. Okay. That's great. That's awesome. Because when the sun is blocked by clouds, it keeps the temperatures down. This is not rocket science. This is stuff that literally kids know. Kids know this. You could ask them. Like, where does all that carbon dioxide go? Trees love it. Remember they used to tell us to talk to our plants? That was a thing. You ever hear that from like your grandmother or something? Make sure you talk to your plants. What are you talking about, Grandma? Talk to them. Don't worry. It helps your plants out. Because guess what they like? Not the conversation. The carbon dioxide. That's what they're looking for. The other thing here is, is the Telegraph telling me right now, is one of the lessons from this, that the more we drill for oil and natural gas, the more coal we pull from the earth, the more energy we produce as a result of all of that, and the more carbon dioxide byproduct we get from that we're going to restore the rainforest? Is that what I'm being told? The answer to saving the rainforest is burning more fossil fuels. Why didn't anybody ever tell me about this? Greta Thunberg is going to be frickin' ecstatic when she finds out about this. Let's see. Although climate modelers have attempted to include estimates for this carbon sink, they literally are talking about plants. Climate modelers have been attempting to factor plants into their assessments. The researchers found that most models were not complex enough to understand the true resilience of plants to climate change. Oh, most climate models are incapable of considering the role that vegetation plays in carbon dioxide? What is this? Why is anyone following any of this with seriousness? Meaning, why are you destroying countries on the basis of this crap pseudoscience? Oh, it's really difficult to consider whether or not plants are having an impact? Of course they are. Again, ask the children. Researchers found that under the extreme RCP 8.5 warming scenario, a pathway where greenhouse gas emissions continue to grow, unmitigated, plants would take a fifth more carbon dioxide from the air than currently expected. The RCP 8.5 scenario predicts a temperature increase of about 4.3 degrees Celsius by 2100 relative to pre-industrial temperatures. However, the authors caution that land ecosystems only absorb about a quarter of human emissions, so the extra benefit would take that up to around 30%. Right. They said it showed the importance of protecting forests and green areas and implementing planting schemes. All right, so this is, anyway, I was literally laughing out loud reading this article. I'm like, this is like the most brain dead possible. You really needed a study. You really needed a study to conclude that plants like carbon dioxide, and that if we produce more, that we'll get more thriving plants, which in turn will absorb more carbon dioxide, which in turn will produce more oxygen. Come on. We're at some point, you know what's going to happen next? We're going to be told that all of this carbon dioxide has been so productive for plants. Now we have too much oxygen. The new crisis will be an excess oxygen crisis. Oh, man. The casinos pump oxygen in to keep you awake at night. We'll be a very productive society with all that extra oxygen. Let's see. Penny calling in from Burke now, line 1. Penny, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince. Thanks for taking my call. We as Republicans have always known that the plants are the natural scrubber for fossil fuels. Mm-hmm. The thing that we don't have a natural scrubber for is all of the rare earth metals that they are bringing up from very deep down, and there is no natural scrubber for those. So those are all in the solar panels, and I actually have experience with a situation in the state of Indiana where a county is considering 13 square miles of solar panels. And they are wrestling with this decision, and there is no reclamation process to restore the land after those panels go bad. And right now, the recycling of those panels will cost $600 million today.
Wow.
Not in 30 years. The farmers are being offered $1 million a year to lease their property to these large solar companies.
And so that's an amazing stat, and it goes in line with something we talked about recently, Penny. You know, these electric vehicles, as cool as some of them are. I'm not measuring. If you like an electric vehicle because it moves fast, good for you. That's awesome. That's not what I'm talking about. The idea that it's some sort of environmental benefit to have an electric vehicle is preposterous. The environmental damage from the pollution of the batteries, which need to be disposed, is a lot bigger than your regular old internal combustion engine vehicle. In fact, the extent to which you have to change the tires on these very heavy electric vehicles suggests that you're going to be burning through tires at a much faster rate than you would a conventional internal combustion vehicle. So, Penny, to your point, all of this stuff is being sold to us as, this is the solution to a cleaner environment. No, not actually. Instead, in your effort to fight carbon dioxide, which comes out of your mouth, you are making more pollution, which I thought was the whole point of the environmental movement, to stop pollution.
Right. And Vince, consider this. So I think right now the cost of replacing a battery in one of those cars is like $30,000. So when one of those batteries goes bad, that is a throwaway junk vehicle. And, I'm sure that there will be some sort of recycling plan for those, but maybe not for the rest of the chassis.
Yeah.
So that is something that we don't know how to deal with. And this consideration of solar farms throughout the United States, Indiana and the Midwest in particular has 500 years of fresh water. There is no other place in the world that is like it. And when they poison the water table with those solar panels, it will be forever.
Yeah. Why isn't the left more focused on the water table? Don't you think that's like a much more useful use of our time? Everything about the endocrine disruptors and all the other stuff that needs to be we need to figure out how to deal with in the water. They're not dealing with any of that. Instead, they're telling us that we're not allowed to burn gas and fossil fuels. That's insane to me, Penny.
Yeah. The answer, we need to pump more. We need to pump more oil. Yep. And the automakers are going broke on these cars. And it's even been considered that possibly Ford would file bankruptcy. And yet they have to build these cars for ESG because they cannot get loan backing if they are not building these cars. So it is an act of brinkmanship that they're either going to go bankrupt or they're going to finally end up making a profit. and more than likely they're going to go bankrupt. And when GM announced that one of their facilities wasn't going to be able to produce a car for another year yet, it was a huge relief for GM because they're putting this off. It is going to bankrupt them.
It's so crazy what it's our government, what our government is doing to us. Thank you, Penny. I appreciate it very much, and all of your insight into that important topic. All right, let's go to the phones. Oh, look, we've got Chris from Marshall calling in on line 3. I saw Chris on Friday at a great event. We were raising some money for a documentary, American Anarchy. Chris, nice to see you then, and nice to have you on the show again. Go ahead, Chris.
Right on, sir. Thank you for taking my call. Disclaimer, I'm calling you from a bad cell coverage area, so I hope I'm coming in clear.
Yeah, you are.
I remember I have a real world firsthand anecdote about what you were talking about, but then I also have a couple other points I wanted to make since I've been on hold. But I remember when Mount Pinatubo blew, it was the largest expulsion of material into the atmosphere that we knew about, that mankind knew about, and they were worried about it creating a nuclear winter, and there was concern about that. And it never materialized, and I heard later that, well, it rained.
It rained.
They didn't factor in that it was going to rain and bring the material out of the atmosphere before it hit the higher elevations.
They didn't factor in the weather in their assessment. I got it.
Exactly. Gee, who knew? But I've lived for years and years and years off-grid, completely off-grid, where I made my own power. I lived in the Out Islands in the Bahamas for a long time. Wow. I have never met a solar panel that was old enough to vote that was still putting out. And they're amortizing all these systems, all these different utility grids installations on a 30-year program, and it's BS. The other issue that I wanted to mention real quick was we have not recycled as much plastic as we have spent on recycling bins.
Is that true?
Recycling is an industry unto its own. Trying to reverse the supply chain is folly. What we need desperately is to focus on packaging that does not need to be recycled. But no, I mean we haven't recycled a scant fraction of the stuff you put in a bin. The overwhelming majority of it ends up in the tip, in the general fund. But actually utilizing that material back in the supply chain as new material, we haven't actually utilized as much of it as we have built. Various recycling bins.
Chris, I really appreciate the call, and it was great seeing you Friday. If only we had people who were actually interested in cleaning up the environment, like the real stuff, the pollution, making it so that you could breathe the air and have clean water. They're not interested in that. Instead, they think they can control the weather by making you never leave your house. What sort of demented religion are we dealing with here? Oh, it's the left. Julio Rosas joins us next. Well, good afternoon to you. 436 here at News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, David Strom is here at 5:30, my buddy from Hot Air. We'll talk to him about Joe Biden turning 81 years old today. Very exciting. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Here's some sound from West Palm Beach yesterday.
We are not going to do this. We're going. We're not doing it.
That's the sound of the police attempting to separate some anti-Israel protesters from some pro-Israel demonstrators yesterday. For more on this, the man who captured that footage, Julio Rosas, joins us now. He's the author of Mostly Peaceful with Julio Rosas, the substack, and the author of the book Firey but Mostly Peaceful, the 2020 Riots and the Gaslighting of America. Julio, good to have you back, sir.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Vince.
Tell us, what was going down in West Palm Beach yesterday?
So it's just been a continuation of what we've been seeing across the country since Hamas's terrorist attacks, and that has been these shows of support for Gaza and to a lesser extent Hamas in not just in major cities like New York City and Los Angeles. Those are obviously continuing as well, but even places like Florida, where you wouldn't expect that many people that many Palestinians to show up. And there was another rally in Boca Raton a few weeks ago that actually got a lot more crazy as well, with fights between the two sides. And so this shows how far-reaching the conflict in the Middle East has internationally, and how it affects us here at home.
Interesting. Now, Palm Beach County in particular, I looked up the numbers. It's something like 20% of the county is Jewish. So this is a pretty heavily Jewish population, right?
Yes, and that's part of the reason why the Palestinian supporters want to show up in these areas. They've also done demonstrations in Miami Beach, Hollywood, Florida. So there's all these different areas that they're putting these shows on, and talking about ending apartheid, quote unquote, and stopping the quote unquote genocide. But obviously, these locations aren't exactly random. They know how many
Yes.
Israelis or people who are Jewish live in these areas.
So it seems to me that this is not just a simple difference of opinion, people expressing themselves on different sides of the street. In fact, some of the footage you captured shows a cop telling a pro-Israeli protester that they needed to move, even though an anti-Israeli protester got in their face. Here's the audio.
Sir, you're going this way. You're going to go over there. That guy's go this way. Excuse me, we stand here not sleep. We were here standing over there. Y'all were standing there not sleep. I'm asking you, sir, stand over there.
How tense are these things getting, Julio Rosas?
Pretty tense. I mean, even just on their own, whether it's just one side showing up. I mean, this conflict goes many generations, many thousands of years back, and so whenever there's, the pro-Israeli side yesterday was very little compared to the Palestinian side, and even then, the Palestinians were crossing the street to be antagonistic towards the very small crowd of Israel supporters, and the Israel supporters actually had children. Young children in attendance as well.
Wait,
and so they're getting in their faces, and that's why the officer was telling them, you got to move, as wrong as that it seems. But the reason they were telling them to move is just because they didn't want anything happening to the Israeli supporters.
So when you say the Palestinian side, are the people who are out there chanting things that are anti-Israel, are they uniformly Arab Palestinian Arabs, or are there also random white kids, the children of orthodontists out there screaming about how much they hate Israel?
Yeah, I would say it's mostly Arab Palestinians and Muslims, but you definitely see like the woke 25-year-old white person showing up. I even saw, being of Mexican descent myself, I saw a guy in a Mexican flag kind of show out there. Also, there was a few Cubans.
There was a guy with a Mexican flag? Was he aware of what was going on, or did he just decide that he wanted to fly a Mexican flag?
Because as there's a lot of overlap with these ideas of decolonization and ending the U.S. imperialism.
Oh my God.
There's a lot of overlap with that, because they view the struggle that's happening in Israel and Gaza. They view that as the same, because that's happened to us as well. And so that's why, like I was saying, there's also Cuban people out there showing their support for Palestine, because they view their struggle as one and the same.
I'm starting to lose track of how any of this makes sense. Unfortunately, I wish I could cling to it, because, my sense is that Cubans are against, tyranny typically and savagery. So I would imagine that that's probably not completely representative of so-called the Cuban community, right?
No, definitely not. And it was probably about 3 total that I personally saw.
Yeah.
This definitely wasn't the Miami Cubans who were Trump supporters. That's for sure.
Yeah, you would think. All right, so there's some more audio. There's an anti-Israel protester gets in your face and then tries to grab your phone. I should remind the audience just to help them understand that Julio's a Marine. So let's listen to this.
You. Grab it. Across the street, okay? Thank you.
So this reminds me of Antifa, Julio. If you've got a cause and you feel like you need to go out in public to display it, why are you so against people filming you express that view?
So there were some in the Palestinian crowd that were upset at me because, again, harking back to the Boca Raton rally, I covered both sides fairly, but they didn't view it that way. They said that I was a Zionist. They said I was lying about them, which is completely false. And so they actually accosted me 3 different times. And the clip that you played, that was the last time, because I finally, crossed the street just because I didn't want to cause anything. But they were, I didn't even know who they were because they were masked. So they were wearing the scarves, the Middle Eastern scarves, completely, covering their face. And so they tried multiple times to attack me. And in fact, the second time they came up to me, one guy said, "I'm going to knock your glasses off, or your sunglasses off." And he did hit my hat to try to knock it off, I guess. I don't know. But the police department did have to come and kind of separate these people. But it just shows that the far left, they really don't like it when you have independent reporters showing up and willing to show what is actually happening, and not propagate this propaganda that they want to put out to make it seem like they're always the victims.
So what happens when you bring up Hamas? Like, if you say, "Hey, do you condemn what Hamas did to Israel?" If you ask that question, how do they react?
So it varies. Sometimes you'll get, "No, I don't condemn Hamas," and that I've run into quite a few of those since I've been covering these protests since October. And then others, they try to downplay it. They say, "Well, it's more a resistance group. I don't necessarily agree with some of their tactics, but that's what Israel gets for doing X, Y, and Z." So it's pretty rare to encounter somebody who say, "Yes, I condemn Hamas," and it's not right what they did on October 7th. I mean, you'll get a few of those, but and most of those answers you'll get from people who aren't actually Palestinians.
Right. So that kind of gives away the game, doesn't it? Because it's not like the answer. I mean, Hamas is for the complete eradication of Israel, and it strikes me that the Americans who are taking to the streets and attacking reporters and attacking pro-Israel demonstrators, they share that view that Israel should not even exist.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, which is even more stark when, again, they got upset because in the Boca Raton rally, I got one of their people on camera saying that he was willing to fight in Gaza at that moment if it meant he could kill the Jewish protesters that were across the street. I mean, that's pretty explicit. I mean, that's not a vague threat by any stretch. He didn't act on it that night, but I mean, the fact that and he had his face fully covered when he made those threats. But I would say it's very concerning. When all this happened on the 7th, I went up to New York City on the 8th, and I was half expecting for people to say we support Palestine and their struggle. We don't necessarily agree with what Hamas did, but speaker after speaker, and majority of the speakers since that first one that I covered, they were praising the attacks. They were cheering it on. They were explicitly saying, yes, resistance by any means necessary, and that's what they get. And it's a lot of people here in the United States who share that view, and that, I'm not gonna lie, is pretty concerning.
Yes.
Especially now going into an election season next year where the stakes are even higher than BLM, because to these people, it's not one person being killed by one police officer. It's an entire nation and people group that are about to be quote unquote genocided.
Julio, do you have a theory as to where all these people learn to act and think like this? I know one of the places that we've looked at, especially for young people, is the extent to which TikTok, the Chinese-controlled social media app, has really pumped this kind of anti-Israel and particularly anti-Jewish propaganda into the phones of so many young Americans. Where are people adopting these ideologies from?
Well, you have to understand that these groups didn't spring up overnight. I mean, a lot of the groups that have been organizing these types of events, they've been around for a while. Within Our Lifetime is based in New York City, and they've been around since 2015. And in fact, I mean, they've been, prior to this, they were holding events that resulted in violence as recently as 2021. So they've been doing this for a while. And so just like with BLM and Antifa, it takes only one thing to really bring them out and to get them energized. And with the overlap that BLM and Antifa have with this struggle, quote unquote, that's why they're ready to go.
Yes.
Because ever since the end of 2021, there really hasn't been an event to kind of spark this wave of protests and riots that we saw in 2020. And I was happy. I was mostly expecting the election and, presumably Donald Trump winning the nomination to kind of get that going again. But with this thing happening in Israel and in the Middle East, it's accelerated that, and it's getting them even more ready for whenever they want to do what they want to do.
This is my next question. Do you believe that what we are seeing now is a warm-up act for what we will see during the 2024 election?
I think so. I definitely think so, because they really embody the ends justify the means kind of mantra. And it doesn't matter how far-fetched or how loosely connected to, if they can connect it to any way to their ideology to say, see, this is why we need to completely abolish the United States as is, they're going to do it. And so, I didn't just subscribe to the theory of like, oh, they only come out during election season, but that's kind of how they've been, kind of staging themselves. And so I think it's definitely going to play a much larger role leading up to November next year. So it's definitely wait and see. We'll see how they deal with the cold, since now it's getting a lot colder. But they're for the Palestinians at least, they're really energized, and they're really going to be out there for as long as they're going to be able to.
And if you start to think too deeply about this, it leads you down the road of thinking like, maybe this is specifically an electoral move. I mean, Biden is at this moment. It's his 81st birthday today. He's never polled lower than he is at this moment. And one of the reasons that he's polling so low, at least on the left, on the right, everyone came to their senses a long time ago. But on the left, they're opposed to him not because of domestic issues, a lot on the left, but instead because he's supposedly supportive of Israel, because he says words of support for Israel, and they hate him for it by wide margins. It's actually unbelievable. And you start to wonder, all of this activity, if it's connected to electoral politics, are they trying to usher Joe Biden towards the exit right now?
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. I would say the window for that is closing pretty quickly here. But a lot of these groups, they do not like Biden. They call him a genocider along with everyone else. And so, even if from a voting standpoint, I think it's because when you look at places like Michigan, where there's a lot of people there that subscribe to this ideology, I mean that's a swing state, and if they are going to follow through on their threats to not vote for Biden, should he still be the nominee, that could shift things up pretty quickly. And so it's going to be very interesting, and that's why I understand Americans are tired with foreign involvement. I definitely understand that. But the reason why people need to be aware of what's going on, and this is what I do through my Substack, is because there's a lot of people here in the United States that have a vested interest in what's going on over there. And they can be pretty violent. And
this is one of the...
And it could show up in your face whether you like it or not.
Definitely. And this is one of the most clarifying moments of our lifetime about the left. For a lot of people who haven't been paying attention, their eyes are being opened to the true bigotry and projection that the left has right now. Julio Rosas, again, the Substack is called Mostly Peaceful with Julio Rosas. Please subscribe to it and support Julio's excellent journalism all around our country. Julio, thank you very much. Always good to talk to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Vince.
It's 4:51 now. Yeah, Julio Rosas, who is really doing great work. We're going to talk. We always talk to Julio, keep talking to him about what's going on across the country. He was at he was in Staten Island, the Flood Staten Island for Gaza protest last week. This is insane.
These elected officials that are spineless elected officials that went out with one-sided statements in support of genocide, we will not forget them. We will go to them in restaurants.
They supported the people who were victimized in a terror attack, idiot.
We will go to them in front of their homes.
He's going on Maxine Waters on this. He's saying basically we need to confront all of these lawmakers at their homes, in restaurants.
And brothers and sisters, do not forget that while they cower behind their buildings, thousands are coming down into the streets, unafraid, unapologetic.
Meanwhile, Hamas keeps killing Israelis. Additionally, the hostages, did you see the video over the weekend? They were bringing them into the hospitals. That's where they were keeping them prisoner there. And it's just, and Israel keeps on putting out the information about all of this and sharing it and bringing in journalists to let them see the infrastructure, the tunnels underneath these hospitals. And then the media writes up stories. The New York Times did over the weekend. They're like, not sure if we can trust Israel. What? After you ran a story saying that Israel had bombed a hospital in Gaza and you relied entirely on Hamas for that story and you didn't blink an eye? I mean, it's so completely dishonest. Coming up, David Strom will be with us in the next hour. We'll explore Joe Biden's advanced age and what it means for our country.